Okay, now we're getting the countdown. Let's see, we're just gonna see if we're live. Give us a heads up if you can see us. Oh, it's our 10th broadcast. That's so exciting.
Nice.
I still want to see that we're building an audience before we begin. So, oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, cool.
Yay.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Hive Live. I'm down here. This is Sage Hayes. We're celebrating the launch of the Hive directory this month with 30 interviews with incredible transformational change makers and healers. Happy Sunday, happy afternoon. I'm down here, Biddeford, Maine, with Dr. Aline Potvin, a naturopathic doctor. And today, we are gonna learn, and I am gonna learn what naturopathy is, because I kind of have to say in this like super humble way, as much as I know about holistic health, I actually don't totally understand what naturopathy is. So we're all gonna learn together. Before I do that though, I also want to say I have to thank Dr. Potvin, because she's one of the reasons why we're even doing all these Hive Lives. We were sitting here 3.5 weeks ago, and I was like, do you think that I could do this thing on Facebook Live? You know, and she was just like, of course you can.
Yes,
and
you must.
And she was, totally, she was like, yes, you must. So we want to thank her, because without her, this wouldn't be happening, all of it. So I just want to thank you, like, initially, a colleague, a friend. Really excited to be here. So thanks for having me. We're in our office. It's beautiful. It's in the Mill building down here in Biddeford if you've never been. Welcome back, everybody. We're psyched to be here with you. Thanks for all the hearts out there. It's really fun to get all the support.
Beautiful confetti.
Exactly, beautiful confetti. So we're gonna start with just why don't you just in the simplest form tell us? We'll start with what you do. Like maybe just talk a little bit about what you do.
So I'm a naturopathic doctor, and generally speaking, what that means is that I practice a form of primary healthcare in a lot of states where it is practiced. It is primary care for a lot of people, where everything that I would prescribe or everything that I would ask a patient to try, any changes that I'd ask them to give a go at, would be meant to stimulate the body's inherent ability to heal itself. So very natural and non-invasive modalities. So while I'm running conventional labs and periodically having to prescribe pharmaceuticals, for the most part I'm prescribing botanical medicines, nutrition, lifestyle changes, nutritional supplements, hydrotherapy, and we can talk about that in regards to history and all that, but and lots of just support and discussion around their how their social sphere is largely impacting their life. So we do a lot of talking. So it's I would say a very large perspective type of medicine, holistic medicine for sure.
Great. So we're going to get a little bit more into the history of naturopathy. That's how you pronounce it, right? But before that, could you maybe just like share a little personal part of your journey about how you came to the medicine and becoming a doctor, and kind of like just share a little bit about your journey? Sure.
So I grew up, for those of you that are familiar with Maine, I grew up in Fort Kent, which is at the very top of the state in Aroostook County. And I think just by virtue of the way my parents, they were definitely hippies, and we grew up very low income, and so they were very resourceful in their way to get us food, and in terms of thinking about self-care and all of that stuff. So
a lot of self-reliance.
Yeah, I mean, and I think just as a region, I mean, Maine in general, people are pretty
right.
they're pretty independent in that regard, but
right.
Definitely growing up in a place where we didn't have access to a lot of, even access to healthcare in a lot of places is really difficult. So
right, because we're talking, let's just frame this for people who don't know what we're talking about geographically. We're in Portland, Maine, you can drive 7 hours north, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like from Portland, it's about 6.5, 7 hours to get up to where I grew up. Yeah,
so it's way up at the top. It's very rural. It's kind of isolated, beautiful, small communities.
Yeah, very small communities.
Small towns.
So, I mean, I think that just geographically growing up in that space really, kind of molded my thoughts around, what it meant to be, how to take care of oneself in that regard. I mean, that being said, growing up in, an isolated Maine town that was rural, and for the most part low income, I mean, you end up with a lot of, diabetes, issue, those kind of health concerns. French Canadian background, it's kind of, throughout that entire population, it's definitely an issue. So, I, definitely wanted to go. I've always been, outside, being outdoors is that's kind of my realm. And so nature always spoke to me. And I always was really drawn towards forms of natural healing, botanical medicines, understanding food, all that stuff. But I actually was sick through a lot of my childhood. I had a lot of pretty significant digestive issues, and as a result, through my teens and early adulthood, suffered from anxiety, depression, things like that. And so I was always looking for a way to kind of work with that and understand how my environment and how, the kind of healing modalities that I use, how that, how I could support myself in that way.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, for sure.
So having sort of gone through both physical digestive issues and then some of maybe the other things that had impact around anxiety and depression, was most of your exposure to traditional medicine with those things, or were you at a point where you could start seeking out did you know that there were alternatives?
I mean, again, my parents were, definitely hippies, so they were totally into a lot of the natural healing stuff. But they didn't really get into any real depth with any of it. We sought out, for healthcare, we often did seek out conventional healthcare. That's how, we were able to figure out, the mechanism behind why I was sick all the time. But there wasn't really any for the digestive issues that I had, and I knew the connection between that and my emotional health at that time. There just wasn't really any conventional options for that kind of stuff. It had to be through, food and
right. It was a different time.
Yeah, there just wasn't. I had to think about it from a more natural perspective, because there just were not. And even now, I mean, what I would have gotten probably would have been, a Prilosec and, any other medications for mental health. It would not have been, for me, it just never felt like that's what I wanted to ask for. So that part of it was choice too. But, yeah.
So this really, I mean, I didn't know this about you. This really set the stage early on.
Yeah, but I didn't actually, when I was really young, I did want to go. I wanted to be a doctor, but I actually kind of fell away from wanting to be a conventional, MD, just by virtue of, watching my parents, both of them, struggle with diabetes and things like that, and it just didn't appeal to me, and over time, it didn't feel like a good fit for me. So I actually, being a complete, nature lover, I actually decided to go into, more eco research. And so for my undergrad, I was studying biology and political science. So
biology and political science. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought for the longest time I was going to be going into like climate change research or whatever.
Oh wow.
But then eventually I realized, as a university student, that all of the, climate issues, I mean, that it was all social issues. It was all about people. And I, did research with damselflies and dragonflies for a little while, actually. And a lot of that time was out in the field, but then I was also spending a ton of time looking through microscopes and just being trapped in a lab. and I was like, I really miss people. And I was kind of, whining about this, and I blogged at the time. And an anonymous poster actually said, have you ever considered naturopathic medicine? Because I was, whining about, really loving my work, but really missing people and not being sure what to do. And so I looked into naturopathic medicine. I was like, wow, that's like exactly.
So there's a poster. What about what year was this?
This would have been 2006, 2007.
Okay, so so how interesting.
Yeah.
Like, who's putting up posters that say, like, have you ever thought about naturopathic
No,
medicine?
they posted on my blog. Like, they were, like, responding to my whining.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's hilarious, because they thought, maybe you'd be into this.
And interestingly enough, it actually turned out she didn't want to influence me, so she didn't tell me who she was, but it was my mother. And she's like, I didn't want to influence you, but I did at the same time.
You guys, that is hilarious.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
My sweet darling mother and all of her,
I know, what the hilarious thing is, my mother's watching right now, so I'm sure. But the thing with Facebook is that you can't look at all the laughs. That's so cute. You can't be. I mean, unless she had like a whatever.
Yeah. I don't know if my mom's actually watching right now. She might be. She might be.
So your mom sort of just like nudged you.
She nudged me in that direction, and it was a big change for me though, because I really thought I was heading in this direction. So I had my crisis, complete panic freak out, a couple nights before I ended up heading off to the school that I had gotten accepted to. But it was just an interesting, it's interesting, how the fear can really try to tug you back. But
I understand.
Yeah, but I went and I did.
Did you love it?
The schooling of it, or yeah, I mean, I went to the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, which is in Toronto. It was a great school. There's actually only, and I can talk a little bit about what the education looks like for an ND. So it's a 4-year program after you've done a bachelor's, and I moved to Toronto to enter into this program. It's a North American board exam system though, so I went to a Canadian school, but I can practice in the US because I've passed North American board exams. But it was good. Like, it was this, it hit all of these things that are very true about me. It hit my inner nerd because we got into the biomedical stuff, but it definitely hit all of those things that I was interested in from a very young age in terms of natural medicine. So the herbs, the hands-on, the physical medicine, the hydrotherapy, which I wasn't really quite familiar with at the time, but really grew on me, and it's something I recommend all the time now. We learned it in the program that I was in. It was actually integrated. Chinese medicine was actually integrated directly into it.
That's so cool.
I was trained in acupuncture. I don't use my acupuncture here in Maine because you have to get separate sub-licensure, but that was something that I used as a student practitioner with almost all of my patients.
So acupuncture, botanical medicine, hydrotherapy, nutritional medicine, again, like all sort of tying back to medicine that's going to stimulate the body's innate healing, right? Like, that's the framework of naturopathy.
That would be, it stimulates what we call the vis medicatrix naturae, which is the body's...
The what?
Vis medicatrix naturae. So
vis medicatrix vasari.
Naturae.
Vis medicatrix naturae.
Yeah, say that 10 times super fast.
Okay, so it stimulates that.
So it's that, and that's the life force, or
the life force. That's what that means. Wow,
we call
that's
it
cool.
The vis. That's what we say for short.
I didn't know that. Did you guys know that? The vis? I bet you somebody out there knew that.
So we have this life force that everything that I would recommend it's meant to stimulate it, but working also with nature, and addressing the real root cause of what's going on. So I might have 5 people that come and see me that have diabetes, but each one of them has come to that state of diabetes through a number of different venues. It's all happened for a different reason, and so to be able to help them, move out of that if that's their choice, is to figure out that root cause, what it is for them, and work on that.
Could you give me like an example of what that might be? Like just for people out there that I know that are watching, kind of like, because how we treat diabetes in the sort of Western medical model is blood sugar monitoring and insulin, right? Which is all, so like what would look a little different? Like give me like a specific example, how it might look, right? Because each person would be different.
So, I mean, for example, some people, the root cause of their type 2 diabetes is that they may be eating food that they're sensitive to that puts stress on the system, that jacks their blood sugar. So it might be the type of food that they're eating. For some, I've had people that come in that, are diabetic because they've actually had some, a traumatic event or series of stressful or traumatic events that have, jacked their cortisol to such levels that their blood sugar stays up and it, puts them into a diabetic state.
So literally a traumatic event potentially could stimulate diabetes. I had no idea.
Absolutely.
Because it jacks the cortisol up. And,
and your blood sugar follows. So if that, if somebody is in a state of low-grade stress over a long period of time, it certainly can make you insulin resistant and eventually diabetic. So, for some people, it's elements of their diet and lifestyle. For some people, it's completely stress-induced. I mean, I've seen people quit their job and their insulin resistance goes away. You have to help them move and work on their food in conjunction with that. But the biggest thing that was keeping their blood sugar up was actually their job.
Why does this feel so mind-blowing? I mean, it is like so beautiful to...
Well, it's because we talk about diabetes, from a conventional perspective, we talk about diabetes as being this thing that, once you get it, then you're on medication for the rest of your life.
Right. But that's what I thought.
Yeah, I've seen it reversed so many times that, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. That's, it's harder to work with that. But type 2 diabetes is... can come from a number of different things, and so as an ND, that's what I'm looking for. Is what is it about this person that's making it so that their blood sugar is dysregulated all the time, and it's different for each person.
Right. So a significant part of your job is doing a really thorough intake and sort of being a little bit of a detective.
Yeah. For sure.
To sort of look at different ways that things may be influencing the current state of health.
Yeah, and it's really, and again, that's why, when I mentioned earlier, just looking at what's going on socially for them too, in their family unit, in their friend unit, and, all of those layers that are part of our complexity.
So you're asking about family, you're asking about job, you're asking about community, friends.
Yeah. I have to understand that if I'm going to understand, and some of that information will come in layers. Some people may not want to talk about that right away. I also have to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, of course.
So, but I do ask about that at some point in our time working together. So, because it's all relevant to what's going on with them.
When people come in and have never been to a naturopath before, and it's sort of this different quality of intake, are people either like are people sometimes excited about how much information you're asking, or is it a little intimidating for people?
I think oftentimes people have read a little bit about it before, or they've talked to me on the phone before they've come in for an actual like meet and greet, or
so you do that. You will talk with somebody on the phone just to help them.
Yeah, if they have questions about what a naturopathic doctor even does, that's important for them to know before they come in and see me.
Sure.
And so yeah, it's definitely I think sometimes people, I have to remind myself as a practitioner too, because I work within a certain framework that, when a person comes in that has a skin disease, for example, psoriasis, eczema, or whatever, that they will think it's weird that I'm asking them about their friends. That they will think
they'll be like, what does this have to do?
And that actually brings up another principle of naturopathic medicine, which is doctor is teacher. The root of the word doctor actually is the same. You know, docer means to teach. So my job, and this is also why I do a lot of education outside of my practice as well, in general, is that one of my biggest jobs as a doctor is to help a person understand, you know, most people, if they are really, reflective, will know why they're there. But my job is to help them understand, you know, kind of how to find their way back to where they want to be. But a lot of what I actually end up doing is explaining to them the care they've already received from other practitioners, and that can be really helpful for people as well. So
to understand some of
you know,
what's already happened, the treatments or the medicine they've taken.
Yeah, why some people, you know, a lot of people don't even know why they're taking a certain medication.
A lot of people don't even know why they're taking a certain medication.
They have no idea.
That's pretty typical these days.
They have no idea, right? They have no idea why.
So you help them to be like, okay, so this is what this is, this is how it works.
I oftentimes will see myself kind of as a translator, because I understand, you know, I have part of a naturopathic training is conventional medicine, but I work more in a holistic framework. So it's I find that I'm able to kind of interpret that information, but how it fits into the context of lifestyle medicine for people, and that's
right. So it's taking conventional lens in a broader sense of lifestyle medicine, or something like that. It's like intersecting them or letting them work together.
Right. And I think that understanding really, you know, if a person even understands what their blood work means, even, you know, a lot of times, you know, they won't if something is not like completely off the charts, like you should be dead, they won't explain to you why they tested it and what it means. And I end up doing a lot of that, you know, just explaining.
Because there's so much information there for the patient.
Yeah, that they could just understand about their overall health. So I end up doing a lot of education.
Which is so exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I enjoy it. Like, you know, when I see light bulbs go on for people, it's one of my favorite parts of the job.
Yeah, well, I would imagine like being able to understand what's actually happening in my body or in my health, it creates a much more of a sense of like, I understand, I have a certain sense of agency now. Maybe now I have some more choices.
Sure.
And maybe I don't feel so powerless, like that you're the expert and that I'm just like, right? So that feels really good.
Because I mean, a lot of times, you know, they can, if I help them understand, you know, kind of what's happened, I mean, they can explain that to other people if they want to. It helps them talk about it, you know, amongst their family or friends. You know, it's definitely naturopathic medicine, just by virtue of its principles and construction, is and it can be a very empowering medicine, because the foundation of it is, you know, that education and supporting of understanding aspect, but also, you know, everything that's given is given with the understanding that you have an innate ability to heal, that, you know, this isn't being given to you because
to heal you,
but also that because your body is deficient and powerless.
Right.
It's because that ability to heal itself is there.
Right.
It just needs to be given some foundation to step off of.
Beautiful.
So that is probably the biggest key difference between, I would say, a naturopathic, you know, framework and a conventional framework.
And that's a big one.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, we could sit around and talk about that one all night, because I love to talk about people's innate ability to heal and the body's, you know, as a cranial sacral therapist, it's one of the first things we learned, just the depth of the wisdom of how physiologically, biologically, energetically, spiritually, how we are wired and we are designed for health. To always be moving toward wellness, to always be moving toward healing. And
we have a template.
We do. That's right. We have a template. And so it sounds like naturopathy. I love that you said like everything we do in naturopathy is is about like connecting with that innate health.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about trying to think it's the thing. It's actually like a collaborative process to
Mm-hmm.
stimulate that innate healing. So I kind of actually want to shift gears in a sense, because I just feel so like I feel so kind of ridiculous that I haven't known much about naturopathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why haven't I known about it? Like, why didn't I grow up with it? And
Mm-hmm.
like, why is this kind of like coming in kind of like almost, you know, pretty recently? And when I read a little bit about it to prepare for our interview, I sort of realized, when I read the history of it, I realized why, you know, some of why. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about
Sure.
how the progression or the evolution.
Yeah, I mean,
for folks.
Even to this day, there's not that many of us. I mean, if I think about our main state association, we have less than 40 practitioners in the state of Maine.
Oh wow!
So we're a smaller profession. For a long time, you know, the profession did kind of have to fly under the radar. You know, we were definitely, you know, booming and being educated as a field and put out as practitioners, very much so towards the, you know, beginning of the, I would say, end of the 1800s, beginning of the 20th century. We had, you know, the roots of naturopathic medicine are in nature cure, which is lots of sunshine, using contrasting hot-cold water, and, you know, dietary therapies. So your typical like European medicinal or medical spa, those are the kind of things that were brought over and were the foundation for North American naturopathic medicine as it is. You know, over time, you know, there was incorporation of botanical medicines, regional botanical medicines, homeopathy, etc. That was some of the, and also, you know, spinal manipulations and things. Physical medicine was also a large part of North American naturopathic medicine, you know, kind of at its beginning time. So there was a big surge of naturopathic medicine at the beginning of the 20th century, but you know, the American Medical Association obviously had issues with that, and so the profession was almost completely wiped out by the end of the 1920s.
Okay, so can we just slow that down for a second?
Sure.
So the American Medical Association was it threatened by it? What, like, do you know, like, if it was?
I mean, I would say, you know, typically there's threat perceived by the American Medical Association with, you know, types of healing that are, you know, do have some traditional base or, you know, aren't pharmacological in nature. I mean, I think that's pretty apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't any different back then, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely, there were a lot of practitioners that were, you know, forced out of practicing. Schools were shut down.
So the AMA literally went on a campaign, right?
I'm not entirely sure about the legalities of it, like what they actually did from like a legislative perspective or whatever. But yeah, it was snuffed out, essentially snuffed out as a profession.
Yeah, just pushed out, snuffed out, very actively.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so there were, you know, people still practicing in, you know, kind of covering very large regions of the U.S. and Canada, and those elders, as we would refer to them, kind of carried naturopathic tradition until, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s. In the 70s, we finally started to establish universities again to actually train naturopathic doctors. So, you know, people that would be elders in the profession now, some of them were actually trained by some of those original or, you know, people that were practicing in the 40s and 50s.
Anybody in Maine?
I'm wondering. I don't know if maybe Priscilla Scary.
Yeah.
I'd have to ask her.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, so it really made a resurgence as a profession in the 70s with, you know, the establishment of, you know, schools and universities.
So somehow they kept it alive. They went underground, or they kept it alive, and
I mean, they were working. A lot of them were. I mean, there's stories about doctors flying in, you know, rickety charter planes from like British Columbia down to Washington and Oregon, like doing rounds that way. because they were the only ones that were practicing that type of medicine. So they were going out to remote places, and so I mean, there definitely were people that were kind of practicing in the woodwork, but keeping that tradition and nature cure alive, as it was called. So
I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge them, that they're like how brave and clear that they were,
No, for sure. And I think that's part of the reason why, some of those people were more established. That's why we have, the oldest school in the U.S. is National. It's now actually called National College of Natural Medicine, maybe. It was called National College of Naturopathic Medicine. It's changed names, but the oldest school is in Portland, Oregon. And then we have Washington, Arizona. We have a new one in Chicago. We have one in Bridgeport. We have 2 in Canada right now. But there's still, 7, 8 campuses, programs that offer the degree. But in the last, 10, 15 years, there's been this sudden surge in naturopathic doctors. I would say similarly to what we're seeing with this influx of, functional medicine, et cetera, we're definitely bringing out more graduates of naturopathic medical programs as well.
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's really helpful, just to give a little background on that. So now I'm like totally sold. I want to come see you or a naturopathic doctor.
Yeah.
So I have Obamacare. I have, for however long I do, which that'll be maybe another topic.
Yeah.
How does it work? Like, how is it covered by insurance, or how do you guys think about that?
So it probably would be important to talk a little bit about where we can practice as licensed practitioners. So we are now actually, just this past week, we became a licensed profession in the state of Massachusetts. So that Massachusetts was the 22nd state.
Good job, Massachusetts!
Yeah, it took them 20 years to get that.
20 years, just this week.
Yeah, and just this week it got
Wow, that's really surprising. Massachusetts seems so progressive. You wouldn't think it would take that long.
They have a lot of medical schools and a lot of a lot of hospitals. So it's the AMA presence is really strong there. And so that was part of the reason why it took so long. But so we can practice as licensed professionals in 22 states. There are people that practice in non-licensed states, but it's just, in terms of, liability and all that kind of stuff, it's a little bit tricky to practice in a non-licensed state. So what we can do in terms of scope of practice differs greatly depending on where you live. So in the state of Maine, it's a little bit more difficult for me to be a primary care physician, only because there's certain things that aren't not part of my scope of practice that, and for example, I can't prescribe an inhaler. So if I have a patient that needs that, I can't do that for them. So they have to have a primary that's going to prescribe that kind of stuff for them. If I was practicing in Oregon or Washington State, I could prescribe any of that stuff. So it's easier to be a primary care physician. In the state of Maine, as far as insurance companies go, I don't think that they allow us to be declared as primaries. Some may, but that's one in our attempt as a state association to kind of get more insurance coverage. That's one thing that larger insurance companies have told us, is that in the state of Maine, they'll never call us a primary. So some practices will bill insurance directly for things that are within, and this again depends on the state of the Affordable Care Act, because according to the Affordable Care Act, if I'm working within the scope of my practice and it's a service that would be covered by like a preventive or an annual physical or something like that, that is meant to be covered by any insurance, but that's interpreted on a state-by-state basis. Okay. So it gets a little hairy in that regard.
Right. So basically, locally, whatever state you're in, you maybe call a naturopath and ask them. You probably start to have that conversation.
And that would be the best thing to do. Because I know people are tuning in from all over the place. if you're unsure about whether your insurance would cover a naturopathic doctor, it would be a good idea to call your company and check, because it's different depending on the jurisdiction that they're in. Most of the time, you know, I don't bill insurance directly, but I do give super bills for reimbursement.
Okay.
And people can use health savings accounts with me directly, so
Great.
that all gets covered. Sometimes people can actually buy it if there's, you know, herbal or nutritional supplements. They can actually order that with their HSA funds as well.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
So the short answer to that is that it really depends on where you live, and whether or not your doctor has the staff to be billing insurance directly.
Great. So that's really helpful. So kind of call your local naturopath if you're really interested, and they will know what's up.
They will know.
Great. So for folks who maybe aren't going to see a naturopath but are really interested in stimulating innate healing, like, are there any strategies or things people could be, I don't know, like any wisdom from the field of naturopathy that are just like best practices for health? Like, I know it's like such a general question, but
I mean, as far as, one of the things about naturopathic medicine too that I don't think I really mentioned before is that every practitioner you go to, and this is all the more reason why if you're seeking out an ND, it's important to talk with them a bit first, because everybody's got a bit of a different flavor to them, or a bit of emphasis that's different in their practice than others. So we are a fairly, diverse but unified group. So that's an important thing to consider. But, foundational things that oftentimes I'll tell people that would be good to work on a little bit before you see anybody, really, an ND, a functional medicine MD, would be, figuring out, for example, if there's foods that you're sensitive to, or working on the digestive tract. That's kind of foundational to everything that you would do with a naturopathic doctor, because that's the core of and the root of a lot of other chronic diseases.
Is the food that you're eating?
The food, but also the state of your digestive tract. So,
and the state of your digestive tract.
That the foundational things would be, food, stress levels, all of that stuff, which it's helpful to work one-on-one with somebody to kind of fine-tune that stuff to you and tailor it to you. But I mean, there are really great, digestive or nutritional support things that you can try before. Like if somebody's never tried like an elimination diet before and they don't know what foods they're sensitive to, I mean, that can be a really helpful thing for people to try.
Let's just talk about that, because I think this is like a very practical tool folks can think about. Is food and sensitivity and digestion is what Dr. Potvin's saying is like very fundamental to health and naturopathic medicine. So it sounds like I know for me, I'd be like, what food am I sensitive to? Like at this point, I mean, I just sort of eat whatever in this moment in time. Yeah. So I would be like, I don't know, like I wouldn't know my sensitivity. So you're sort of saying like how you would figure out what you're sensitive to is you do something called elimination diet, which sounds terrifying actually, an elimination diet. So let's just break it down for a second.
I mean, usually a really quick version of an elimination diet is to take out, things for usually 4 or 5 weeks is a good amount of time to take them out. But
so take a particular thing out?
Take particular foods out that people are commonly sensitive to.
So 5 foods people are commonly sensitive to.
I would say corn is a big one, dairy, wheat, gluten, that's kind of debatable. A lot of this is also, some of these things people are sensitive to because of what gets sprayed on them, but that's a whole other ball of wax. But caffeine, alcohol, sugar, those are kind of the big ones, which is like all tasty things, right?
Of course.
All of the delicious things.
Yeah.
But what can be helpful is for a short period of time, 4 weeks, eliminating
one of them.
You can eliminate all of them. You can eliminate one of them.
Whoa.
The purpose, or it's more beneficial, or it's more it's easier to tell if you're sensitive to it if you take out a bunch of things and then reintroduce.
Okay, so you take out a bunch of things and then reintroduce one at a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what that does, and the reason why I'm a fan of this as opposed to, you can get food allergy testing, but food allergy tests tend to be really expensive. I find that the results aren't always consistent. Like people will retest and they're getting different results. With a hypoallergenic diet and reintroduction, your body will tell you what's going on. So I use it also as a tool of body awareness, because a lot of us, most people don't hang out in their own bodies for various reasons. So it's also a way to kind of like pay attention to what happens to it. And it might not be that you have digestive symptoms. You might get really tired, or sugar might make you really irritable with people, and you didn't know why you were irritable a lot of the time. So it can bring awareness in a lot of different realms.
Right, and in ways, like, there's so much information that it potentially could, even though it's like a pain in the ass because you don't want to give the things up, but even like 4 weeks, you sort of think, how much information could come from it?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not even, you could go see a naturopathic doctor after that, but in a way, like, you reintroduce sugar and all of a sudden you're like a crazy person because from irritability.
Yeah.
Like, now like, actually you have the agency to be like, oh, okay, I know I'm more sensitive to this.
Yeah,
and, it's not like rocket science.
No, it's
in
very
that
simple.
regard.
But and some people, it really depends on the person too. Some people might, really want a hand to hold during doing an elimination diet. But if, I think if a person feels pretty, is fairly certain that it's something they could at least try on their own, then it can give you a lot of information. And also you might learn in the process that you really do need a hand to hold to get through the rest of it.
Totally.
And so it can give you a lot of information about what you might actually need too in terms of care. So
right.
I like the elimination diet as a means of raising awareness in a lot of realms, to be honest.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do is on on the notes from tonight's show, is I'd like to put in a link to maybe like an article or like a example of an elimination diet for like if people didn't get all the foods down. I think that would be really great, of course, along with all your info and other pieces.
And I think too, another thing to kind of bring in with that as well is that, with an elimination diet, it's not, for a lot of people, it's not so easy to say, take out wheat, corn, because that's like, for a lot of people, figuring out, first of all, what to prepare is tricky. There are a lot of resources online to be able to help you with that, but what if you don't have access to that kind of food? What if you're out of season?
What if you can't?
What if you can't even afford it? Like, what if you can't afford certain foods? Part of what I do a lot with people is helping them engineer some of these, methodologies or some of these treatments. How can we tailor this in some way, shape, or form into the life that you actually live? And that's huge for people, because I think naturopathic medicine, especially if it's not covered by insurance, it can be an inaccessible medicine for some people, and that's... You
mean inaccessible financially?
Financially,
yes. Which is part of why I wanted to see if there's a good one tool from the medicine.
Yeah, and I think that there is a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of the educational things that I would put out there can be really empowering. People can do a lot of this kind of stuff at home, which is great. That's part of why I do a lot of blogging and workshops and things like that.
I know, I love that about you.
It's really, really, it's important for me because I know that there are people that can't necessarily access me for one-on-one care.
So we're going to give you all links to Dr. Potvin's blog, and she writes, she goes to the beach and she talks to us about naturopathic medicine. It's like, they're so amazing. So make sure that you get those links.
But yeah, it's really important to me. And I think to a lot of people that are working as naturopathic doctors, it's the tailoring and engineering. How do we help bring some of this stuff into the life that you actually live, and still pushing you to kind of we still gotta poke, and if you have something that you want to do, we'll help and we'll poke at the same time in a way that feels good to you. But like it's important to really, how a person, quote unquote, is gonna eat healthy is going to be different. You know, how I help them figure that out is going to be different on what they can do within a given time with what resources they have, and I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we all have to be strategic about our resources, and not only financially, but also time. And
I mean,
there's so much information, and you know, so it's like adding.
And it can be, I think that anytime you're making any sort of change, I mean, that in and of itself can be scary and intimidating. So, you know, what pace do we have to kind of take that at? And that's something that, you know, I'm sure I was, you know, I get more and more sensitive to that as I go through practice. I mean, that's part of the learning as a practitioner as well.
Absolutely. That's great. So we're going to start to wind it down a little bit. There's so much more we could talk about that we talked about talking about that we haven't gotten to. But it's believe it or not, it's like almost 5 of 6. So
oh wow!
I know, exactly. It's so cool. One question I want to ask you, and if it resonates, and then if it doesn't, I'll move on to another question. Is like, from your perspective as a naturopathic doctor, as a healer, as a shamanic practitioner, and any of your lenses that you have, what's one thing that you kind of feel like people aren't talking about enough in the health realm, or either that comes up for your clients or that you see through your lens? Like, is there something that you really wish was being talked about more?
I wish that we would talk about shame more, and shame in healthcare, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of, you know, tailoring things to people. There's shame in so many facets of helping a person, you know, either change lifestyle stuff or even why they're in to see me. And I see one of the biggest problems I have too with, you know, and it's not even just a conventional healthcare setting. We use shame as a way to try to get people to change all the time.
Let's just say that again. So we, the big collective use shame all the time to try to get people to change. And does that work?
Never. I mean,
never. It doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
Like, maybe it works for a moment, but then usually there's a backlash to it.
There's always a backlash, always, and that is. I mean, a lot of people will come and talk to me about their experiences, you know, in a conventional setting, and how they felt, you know, ashamed because they weren't, I don't know, meeting certain standards or benchmarks, or, you know, they just didn't. It was just all such a wrong fit in so many different ways, and so it's made me really conscious as a practitioner, especially since people are asking me to help them to make changes. Really being conscious of my own shame and how I could potentially project that on somebody else, and just really trying to be very acutely aware of that as I'm working through, and that, you know, I never make somebody feel that way with the kind of sensitive work that we have to do to help with change. So that's definitely a huge thing. We don't talk about how detrimental that is to people's health, and why we're in such a chronic disease crisis is largely because of shame. Okay, you heard it here. I hope everybody else is talking about this. I mean, I agree with you 100% about shame and how it is actually literally contributing physiologically to chronic disease, stress, and it's not the easiest thing to undo. No.
Right?
No, not at all. But I think, like,
I'm gonna do one of these on shame. I'm gonna find somebody who really loves to talk about shame. And has some ideas about it.
I mean, that is the thing. There's not that many that really love to talk about it.
Well,
but, I mean, there are people.
Yeah, people are. Totally. I mean, Brene Brown does some interesting conversations about shame.
She does.
So maybe Brene Brown, you might want to be on the Hive Live.
Yeah.
Totally.
Maybe we should give her a call.
Yeah, give her a call.
Why not?
Exactly. Why not? Totally. Who knows? You never know. So we're gonna wrap up. Is there anything else you want to talk about as we wrap up? Anything else you want to mention? Maybe you could talk a little bit about, so if somebody want to come see you, How does that work? How do they find you?
I mean, you can find me on the Hive. I'm on there. Really, all of my practice information is on there, and actually, I need to.
That's the Hive directory.
The Hive directory.
HiveDirectory.net.
So yeah, if you want to know more about me or my practice, all of the links to all of my various, my website and blog and all of that other, get in touch stuff it's all there. So you're more than welcome to check that out and reach out and say hi.
And like, she's such an exciting person to follow, because there's always something really interesting, or maybe not always, but like there's like videos, and there's really, I don't know, I'm always so inspired by the creative ways that you are looking to connect with people.
Yeah.
I think you're a practitioner that I think has really inspired me to do that. So I really want to encourage folks to connect with you, if just through the web, but potentially, through naturopathy, and to like make an appointment. Like, is it sort of so there's a couple appointments people make? Like, how does that work?
So I have a membership practice. So I have so many visits per year, but the way I set it up was in such a way that people could be in touch with me basically all the time.
That's amazing.
Because one of the biggest, so this is not how my practice looked when I first started to practice, but what I noticed is that, and this also goes back to the shame piece, is that people would, start to work with me. They'd hit a roadblock, or maybe I didn't explain something well enough, or they didn't understand, or they struggled with something, and then they wouldn't feel like they could just ask me, because it might mean I'd have to have them come back in, blah blah blah, and so then they of course get frustrated and stop doing the things that we had kind of formulated together, and so I set it up as a membership with kind of free communication, so that any little blip, any misunderstanding, they could feel like they could just pick up the phone, or they could drop me a little line anytime, so that we can just clear that stuff up, because that's not, for me, the visits would be for like the big stuff, and for, if they get really, I have to see what's going on, but there's so much in that care that can be done either remotely or just in the spur of the moment.
It reminds me a lot about, I have a lot of very good friends who do midwifery care, and it's similar. There's like the visits, and then there's going to be questions that go along with different things.
Inevitably.
And that makes so much sense.
Yeah, so, and then as part of the membership too, people forever and always actually can come to my classes for free.
Oh, that's awesome. So you do classes?
I do classes and workshops, and so, even if a person has, their membership has ended, or, whatever, they can still come to my classes.
That's so generous.
Well, that's the most important part, I think, of what I do. So it's important for me to be able to keep offering that, because they're going to keep growing. We just kind of planted some seeds, and then
who doesn't want to come see Dr. Potvin after this? I mean, holy smokes! There's a lot of love here. I just want to thank you so much for your time, and like all your wisdom and what you're holding down here, and the wisdom you're holding down here, because I feel like healers and practitioners like you, like me, like so many of us on the Hive, and folks who we're talking to are like lighthouses, right, with all this wisdom. And part of this whole project is just like freely just saying, like, these are the resources that are here for everybody. And even if you can't afford to come see people, there's still things that you can do. And there's a lot of things that a lot of these practitioners are doing that are totally accessible, no matter what your financial situation is. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we're doing Hive Live, is because we really want to get more information out to more people, so that we can better take care of ourselves, we can better take care of each other, in a paradigm of trusting our own innate healing, right? So we're shifting the paradigm here to innate healing, innate wisdom, trusting our bodies, practicing learning how to trust each other, reducing shame, being in relationship with nature and food and the natural world. So we're just like, we're just making a big effort to help to help centralize these modalities of healing, because there's so much medicine in them that is untapped. So anyways, my heart just feels so full. And want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Thanks for all the hearts. It's so cute, little popping up.
I love them.
Isn't it so sweet? I hope we were loud enough for you. I got to get a microphone soon just so that it doesn't sound like I'm shouting all the time. Tomorrow, I was supposed to be up at Nurture Through Nature. I'm taking the day off because our person up there got a cold. So tomorrow, happy Martin Luther King Day. Deep liberation to all of you in all the ways right now on the planet at this particularly potent time. I hope you find something to do tomorrow that feels honoring of his legacy, but also the legacy of freedom and liberation. We'll be back on Tuesday with a good friend and colleague, Ann Helfrich, who's a licensed acupuncturist. Really excited to talk to her. Like, what is acupuncture? How does it work? And then on Wednesday, the title is Deep Choice with Shannon Mackey Fisher. Ooh. She works with choice, abortion services, women's health care, reproductive justice, sexuality, parenting. Don't miss that one. That's going to be I can't remember what time actually. I think 12:30 on Wednesday. So many more this week, but those two in particular. Love you guys so much. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for the hearts.